So today we are going to talk about Satta Bojjhanga. Now Bojjhanga means the various characteristics of the nature of awakening, but actually these are 7 steps in the process of awakening. So we translate that as the 7 steps to awakening. Although the word Bojjhanga, anga really means something like the constituents or the parts of the awakening process. But this is not just parts, these are really steps in the process of awakening. And this, following these steps in the process of awakening, is what is called vipassana bhavana. But today, most of the people who talk about vipassana meditation, they are not following these steps. This is why I say that modern meditation is not really the teachings of the Buddha. We can't help this because it is more than 2,500 years after the Buddha. So the teaching of the Buddha has become polluted, because it has got mixed with so many other ideas, and the real pure arahants who were really aware of the teachings, they have passed away. So later Buddhists just tried to interpret these teachings in different ways, and they understood it in different ways. Even 300 years after the Buddha, the time of Asoka, the emperor of India, even at that time, there were 18 schools of Buddhism. So that means there were 18 ways of interpreting the teachings of the Buddha. So that shows that people didn't really understand the teaching of the Buddha. If there were people interpreting in 18 ways. So we cannot blame the modern people for this. All the different kinds of Buddhism that you find today, supposed to be the original teachings, but they are not the original teachings. This is why I had to struggle all my life to understand the teachings of the Buddha, the original teachings. I was not interested in the modern forms of Buddhism. I wanted to know the original teaching of the Buddha. And so, at least to some extent, I have found it, and that is what I teach. So what I teach can be different from the kind of Buddhism that you have read or heard of. So that is the reason for that. So it is very important to understand the original teachings in the proper way, and so I have translated these things in the best way I can think of, so that you will be able to understand this properly. So, if you want to practice real vipassana, you have to practice these 7 steps to awakening. But unfortunately, even if you are interested in practicing it according to this method, you cannot start there. That is not the starting point. It is like if you want to get a PhD or something from university and you have never even studied the kindergarten or even the first, second, third, fourth levels, you can't go and read a book in the university. So it's like that. You have to gradually develop to a certain level before you can start on this. So this is why we have in our meditation retreats 3 levels: the beginner's level, the intermediate, and the advanced level. So here we are really talking about the advanced level, not the beginner's level. And in ancient times, during the time of the Buddha, when some arahant who is fully awakened person, if such a person falls sick, the Buddha will go and simply chant these 7 steps to awakening. That means he reminds that person about the awakening process. And when he is reminded of that, his sickness disappears. He becomes cured. But today you find when people are sick, they go and chant but those people can be cured only through faith. That's like hypnosis. If you really believe in that, then it can help you. But it's not the real cure that an arahant who has been practicing this can get. So, when we speak about these 7 steps to awakening, what we really do is a very important thing that Buddhists today have missed. That means there was a time when the Buddha was preaching the Dhamma. There were the Hindus. Of course, they didn't like the Buddha, but they learned from the Buddha. They learned from the Buddha to improve their own religion. And they borrowed concepts from the Buddha and began to add those concepts into their teachings. And that is how we find today a thing called Patanjali Yoga. If you have heard about this, Patanjali Yoga was written by a person called Patanjali, who was a Hindu. And he borrowed from the teachings of the Buddha, because the Buddha's teaching is the Noble Eightfold Path. There are again 8 steps. The Patanjali Yoga also has 8 steps. But they are explained in a slightly different way. But one very important thing in these 8 steps, the Patanjali Yoga, the most important thing is there. But still the modern Hindus don't even understand that properly. But still that teaching is there. And the Buddhists who practice the teachings of the Buddha and even what they call samatha and vipassana and big words they use, but they don't know this, the secret. There are other people, even today I read a book about hypnosis, and there also this writer on hypnosis mentions that important one. He is aware of it. But the Buddhists who practice what they call Buddhist meditation, they are not aware of it. That's very interesting. And this important thing is, today the modern scientists, they are mainly interested in knowing the world, external world that we are aware of. And so they focus their attention on what they observe through the senses. That means what they see, what they hear, what they smell, what they taste, what they touch. That is called empiricism. Empiricism is to examine what they perceive through the senses. And they regard that as the truth. And there have been psychologists like Sigmund Freud. He did something else. He turned inwards and tried to understand the mind, the mental process. And by trying to understand the mental process, he understood many things. But then, another school of psychology called behaviorism, they began to say Sigmund Freud was unscientific. Why? Because he was looking inwards. To be scientific, you must look outwards, not inwards. Because all sciences, which are all physical sciences, they are looking outwards. But still later certain psychologists who are called cognitive psychologists, they began to realize that to understand the mind we have to look inwards. Because what we call the mind is a subjective experience. What we call matter is an objective experience. So if we are going to study matter, then we have to look outwards. But if we are going to study the mind, we'll have to look inwards. So somehow, even psychologists are gradually beginning to realize this. But it was the Buddha who pointed inwards. That is why it is called introspective. Openaiko, that is the word that the Buddha used. Openaiko. Openaiko means upanayati. Upa means inside. Nayati means leads or points inward, which is introspection, looking inwards. And this is the most important thing here. When we begin to meditate, I told you there are 4 things to be practiced. Prevention, elimination, cultivation, and maintenance. Prevention, elimination, cultivation and maintenance. I was just taking the words according to the Pali words that are being used. But what is really happening is, prevention means to stop focusing on what we see or hear or smell or taste or touch. In order to purify the mind, we have to guard the senses. And guarding the senses means when we see an object, we don't look at it and think about the pleasantness or the unpleasantness of what we see. If we think about the pleasantness of what we see, we are attracted to it automatically. Oh, how beautiful this is, and then we are attracted. If we think about the unpleasantness of what we see, oh, how ugly this is, then we are repelled by that. The most important thing here is the way we think about what we see. So instead of focusing our attention on what we see, we withdraw the attention. We withdraw the attention away from what we see or hear or smell or taste or touch. If we withdraw our attention, these unwanted emotional thoughts are not aroused. That means the mind gets purified. Purifying the mind means avoiding the emotional thoughts. But there is still a problem that remains. You may be withdrawing your attention from what you see, hear, smell, taste, touch, but memories come into your mind. What you saw yesterday or day before or maybe last year or last month, or what you heard or what you smelled or what you tasted or what you touched. The memories. When the memories come to the mind, again you are emotionally aroused. Even if you practice guarding the senses, still the memories begin to disturb you. So when that happens, what you do is you take your attention away from the memories also. You have to train yourself to take your attention away from the memories. Now in both these practices, what you are doing is taking your attention away from your senses and from your memories. Now when you take your attention away from these things, where are you going to put your attention? Now the next step is to put your attention inside, to look at your mind. You begin to focus your attention inwards. That focusing attention inwards is what is called satipatthana. Sati means attention, and patthana is not really patthana, it is upatthana. It's the rati upatthana that becomes satipatthana. There upatthana means to focus it inwards. Now the same thing the Buddha says in a few more words while saying Parimukham satim upathapetva. Parimukham means your attention that is focused outside, around you. Now you are focusing your attention inwards. Parimukham satim upathapetva. Now that is very important, but the normal Buddhists who meditate, they are not doing that. This is very important to understand. Now in that Patanjali Yoga, they teach this. There they say, samannahara and dharana. Samannahara means taking your attention away from the objects. And dharana means placing it inwards. That's very important. That means you are focusing your attention on the mind, that means really when you focus your attention on something outside, either you are attracted to it or you are repelled by it. Now when you focus your attention inwards, what you become aware of is the reaction to what you observe. You are not looking at what you see, You are looking at your reaction to what you see, which is going on inside you. And it is that reaction that you see in four parts. The reaction is seen in four parts. The first part is what we call the physical manifestation of the reaction. The physical manifestation of the reaction. That means when you react to what you see, the first thing is your body has changed. I told you, when an emotion is aroused, it is not just a thought. It is a complete change in the body. When the emotion is aroused, the body is changed. And that change in the body can be observed. When you become angry, your body changes and you can see the change in the body, either in the form of tensions or the heart beating faster or the breathing becoming heavier, all these different things that are happening in the body. And that observing the body is what is called kayanupassana. Kaya means the body. So when we speak about kayanupassana, it is not just looking at the body. You are looking at the physical manifestation of the reaction. That's the important thing. And then it is not only the physical manifestation of the reaction, you also become aware of how the body feels. You'll also observe that the body begins to feel uncomfortable, really. When the emotion is aroused, the body is not comfortable. That change in the body is uncomfortable. Then you observe that as a feeling, and that is called Vedananupassana. That is called Vedananupassana. Then the next thing that happens is you become aware of the emotion that is aroused. Whether it is anger, or whether it is fear, or whether it is a sensual lust, passion, or whether it is a worry, whatever the emotion that has been aroused, you become aware of it. That is the third step. That is called Chittanupassana. I told you the word Chitta really refers to the emotion, not just the mind. I pointed out that there are two parts of the mind. One is the emotional part, and the other is the thinking part, which is mainly the activity of the brain, the thinking that is going on in the brain. Then the next step is to observe the thinking part, which is how you interpreted what you saw or heard or smelled or tasted or touched. Your interpretation of your circumstance. So when you have understood that your emotion was aroused according to the way you interpreted what was occurring in the world around you, then you begin to see that it was this interpretation that started this emotional arousal. And you begin to see that simply as an interpretation, not as a truth or a falsehood, but as an interpretation. And when you see this as an interpretation, then the strength of that interpretation is weakened. And that interpretation could be different. We have only interpreted it in a certain way. We could have interpreted the same thing in a different way. So the validity of the interpretation is lost. And when that happens, the emotional arousal stops. So this way, by becoming aware of this mental process, the mental process which was going on unconsciously, now you have become conscious. You have become conscious of the unconscious process. And when you have become conscious of that unconscious process, the unconscious process stops. It cannot go on consciously. It can go on only unconsciously. Now this is what Sigmund Freud saw. And that is how he was able to stop some of these psychological problems that people are suffering from. He could get rid of it this way, by becoming conscious of the unconscious process that is going on. And this is what the Buddha did also, but in a different way. Not in the same way that Freud did it. But the principle was the same. Now this process is simply following the steps in this awakening process. The first step is sati, satipatthana, which is the introversion of attention. And with the introversion of attention, the second step is becoming conscious of the unconscious reaction. Becoming conscious of the unconscious reaction is Dhamma Vichaya. So, Dhamma Vichaya means becoming conscious of the unconscious process. And that becoming conscious of the unconscious process gives strength to that thinking part to stop the emotional part. Now the thinking part has become strong enough to stop the emotional part. By becoming conscious of the unconscious process, which is the emotional part. The emotion is aroused through this unconscious process, which is the reaction. That is the virya or strength or willpower. So this is not blind willpower. This is an enlightened willpower. It's not a blind force. Like blind determination or something. These determinations don't work properly because that is not the way to do it. Because there the conscious thinking process has not become aware of the unconscious process. Here by the thinking process becoming aware of the unconscious emotional process, the emotional process stops. By becoming conscious. By becoming conscious, the thinking process has been able to overcome the emotional process. That's the important thing. By doing this, the mind becomes purified. And when the mind is purified, the mind is free from emotional excitements, which are all self-centered. All emotional excitements are self-centered. And when the mind is free of this self-centeredness, what happens? The mind becomes happy. That happiness of the mind is what is called piti, rapture. Rapture is that happiness of the mind due to the freedom from emotional excitement. When the mind is not polluted by emotional excitements, the mind is happy automatically. This happiness is not another kind of excitement. This happiness is a tranquil state of the mind. This peaceful, tranquil state of the mind is the rapture. This rapture is not an excitement. And with this peaceful state of the mind, the body relaxes. The body relaxes because all emotions makes the whole body tense, and the tension makes you uncomfortable. Now, because the body is relaxed, the body becomes comfortable. The body is comfortable and relaxed. And when the body is comfortable and relaxed, the mind reaches a stage of tranquility or stillness of the mind. The mind is still. That stillness of mind is what is called samadhi. Usually samadhi is translated as concentration. This is not concentration. This is relaxation and tranquility of mind, which is the stillness of the mind, the unshaken state of the mind. It is resting. The mind is resting and not concentrating. Concentration is not a rest. Concentration is an effort. Here there is no effort. This is the resting of the mind. With the relaxation of the body, the mind becomes rested. Now when that happens, you are in the first jhana. That first jhana is the first level of tranquility. Now, with that comes the second jhana, the third jhana, and the fourth jhana. It becomes more and more tranquil. And at the fourth jhana, the tranquility becomes perfect. And in this perfect tranquility, your attention is focused within and not outside. And you are fully aware of the process of perception. You become fully aware of the process of perception. There is no self to be seen anywhere, but only the process of perception. You are able to see the process of perception, and that is what is called apperception. There is a word that has been used by philosophers. Apperception is something different from perception. It is not perception, it is apperception. And apperception is something completely different. And instead of seeing what you see, you are seeing how you see. Instead of seeing what you see, you are seeing how you see. That is the apperception. that process of perception is perceived. And it is this process of perception that we tend to personalize. And we personalize means we think this is mine. And this process of perception, when we see this as mine, then that what is mine becomes myself. So myself comes into being by personalizing the process of perception. I am seeing things. This is why Descartes, that great philosopher of the West, he said, I think, therefore I am. He was making that same mistake of personalizing the process of perception. And many Western philosophers were blindly following his line of thought. Even now they are still going on with that. This is why they could never get at the truth. You see, there were 3 philosophers in England, the United Kingdom. It was John Locke who started pointing out that there is no real thing called the mind. What we call the mind is simply the activity of the body. And there is only matter, and there is no mind. He was from England. But there was another man from Ireland who was a bishop, a Christian bishop. He didn't like this idea of saying that there is no mind, because they were always talking about God and the mind of God. And so he brought an argument and said, there is no such thing as matter. What we call mind, matter is only a thought in our mind. It is only a concept. And therefore there is no such thing as matter, there is only mind. So they were directly opposed. One man says there is no mind, there is only matter, and the other man says there is no matter, there is only mind. So people could find out the truth. Both seem to be correct. So another man came from Scotland. He was Hume. He said, you are both right and both wrong. One man proved that there is no such thing as mind, and the other man proved that there is no such thing as matter. That is correct. both matter and mind don't exist. We can only speak about seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching. This is experience. That is what is called experience. We can only talk about experience. And in this experience we are thinking of a subject and an object. We think the subject exists and the object exists. That is where we go wrong. The subject doesn't exist, the object doesn't exist. There is only the experience, and it is only in the experience that we are thinking of a subject and an object. The subject and the object are creations of the process of experiencing. So we can only talk about that process of experiencing. So the Buddha pointed out, the Buddha took that same view that Hume took, the middle way. But he added that even that experiencing, we begin to personalize. And it is because we personalize the experience, we think of a self that exists. That self that exists is created by personalizing, saying this is mine. And by saying this is mine, it becomes myself. And it is only as long as we keep on thinking that we exist that we begin to suffer. That whole process of existence is what Charles Darwin saw as the struggle for existence. It is the struggle for existence that is the suffering that we are going through. We are struggling to exist, but we don't really exist. We are only struggling to exist, and the struggle is a failure because everyone has to die. So we cannot really exist. Every moment it is something new. The past doesn't exist. The future doesn't exist. And even the present doesn't exist. The present is becoming the past every moment. So it is only then, when we begin to understand this, that we begin to awaken from the dream of existence. That awakening from the dream of existence is what we call becoming a Buddha. Buddha means the awakened one. The one who is awakened. And awakened means awakened from the dream of existence. We are always dreaming that we exist. And this is why we have all the troubles in the world. If we can realize that we are not existing, then there will be no problems. If we don't exist, can we die? Even before we can die, we have to exist. And if we don't exist, how can we die? So this is why we become free from even death. In other words, we become immortal. And immortality means permanent, doesn't mean permanence, living. Immortality simply means deathlessness. Because we are all the time struggling to live, we don't even like to think of death or even immortality. And all this is because when we think of this rationally, using our reasoning powers, we understand it. But we are carried away by our emotions. It's the emotions that really become the cause of all our unhappiness. This is the meaning of tanha. The word tanha was used to refer to emotions. Emotions which are blind. So this is the ultimate end of the Bojjhanga process. We started with sati, we ended with upekha. Sati means turning inwards, and upekha means seeing what is within. So first we look within and then we see within. Between the looking and the seeing, there are 5 steps to go. That's how we have 7 steps. So that is the awakening process. How we awaken from the dream of existence. So this is very interesting to understand that it is only when we have awakened from the dream of existence, we begin to experience Nibbana, which is Akuppa Cheto Vimukti. Akuppa Cheto Vimukti means the mind that is not disturbed. The imperturbable serenity of mind. The imperturbable serenity of mind. The mind that is undisturbed. Whatever happens in the world. That is the meaning of Nibbana. It's not a heaven that you go into where you get all the pleasures. This is simply a state of mind that is never disturbed. Whatever happens in the world. This is why the Buddha said, Aneka jati sansarang sanda vissang anibvisang gahakarakang gavesanto dukkha jati punapuna. Gahakaraka dittosi puna gehang nakahasi sabbe te pasuka bhagga gahakutang visankitang visankhara gatan chittang tanhayang kayamajjagati. Through innumerable lives in this vortex of rebirth, did I seek the creator of this grief-ridden world. Never did I find this creator unknown. It is painful to be born again and again. O Creator, I have seen you. You will never create again. Your structure is dismantled. The foundation destroyed. The mind has stopped creating. The emotional urge has ceased. So that is what the Buddha said. That first part, the Buddha says, through innumerable lives in this vortex of rebirth, did I seek the creator of this grief-ridden world. Never did I find this creator unknown. It is painful to be born again and again. Now that part is where how he suffered before he awakened. And then he goes on to talk about his awakening. O Creator, I have seen you. You will never create again. Now he says, I have seen you, Creator. But who is that Creator? Your structure is dismantled, the foundation is destroyed. Who is that Creator? The mind has stopped creating. It is your own mind that is the Creator. The emotional urge has ceased. It is the emotional urge which is tanha that is doing the creation.
What about the structure? What about the structure and the foundation? These two are referring to what?
Structure. The structure is the world that has been created. And the foundation is that emotional urge that is the foundation on which the world
and
is
what about
created.
the avijja? What about the avijja?
Avijja is the unconsciousness. It is all happening unconsciously.
So can he seem to be a foundation for this creation also? Can I say
What's that?
Can I say that the avijja is the creation, is the foundation for creation?
The foundation. Yeah, it's not only the avijja, it is the emotion that is unconscious. Avijja is only the unconsciousness, but it is the emotion which is unconscious that is doing it. So now is the time for questions. So if you have any questions, you can ask.
Don't mind asking.
Huh?
Can you repeat refer to page number 2 or item number 8.
What's that?
Page 2 number 8.
Item number 8.
Page 2 number 8.
Introspection comes insight, which comes from perception and full comprehension. So in here, these are full comprehension you are referring to.
What's that? Abhinya.
Yes.
Apperception.
And full comprehension.
Apperception.
No, the full comprehension. Parinya.
Full comprehension. Parinya.
Yeah, what does it mean for that?
That means now we have this word panya. The word panya we call it insight or something. Now that real insight comes from two things, the abhinya and parinya. Abhinya is that apperception that you see from inside, not from outside. And when you are seeing from inside, you are seeing not what you see, but how you see. You are seeing not what you see, but how you see. Did you get that? Means very difficult to understand this till you begin to do that. It's only when you begin to do it that you begin to understand it.
And then what about the full comprehension? Parinya.
The parinya means full comprehension. That means now when you look outside, you see what you see. But when you look inside, you begin to see how you see. And when you begin to see how you see, what you see appears to be false. So the important thing is that if when you begin to see how you see, you reject what you see as the truth. So you are taking two sides. And when that happens, you are one-sided. That is what is called unilateral thinking. But when you say abhinya and parinya means you are seeing both sides. And therefore you don't take sides. Now for example, if the Buddha says there is no self here, so you can come and argue if there is no self, I can attack you and kill you, and there is no self, so I am not killing anyone. Now that is taking one side. But to take both sides is to see both ways. Although both ways are taking different ideas or different ways of looking at the same thing, then you are not taking any sides. You are not unilateral. You are multilateral. It is like the blind men who touch the elephant. One man touching the legs thinks the elephant is like a tree. Another man touching the body of the elephant thinks the elephant is like a wall or something. Another man touching the ears thinks the elephant is like a fan. Like that. But they are all correct. But at the same time, they are wrong because you are seeing only one side of it. So to be correct, you have to agree with all sides. And so you cannot take one side. Because what we call experience is multilateral. It's like taking pictures with a camera. If you turn in one direction, you take one picture. You turn in the other direction, your picture is different. And if you take pictures turning all round, you have different pictures. But still, they are not different. They are all the same. When we think of the whole room, we understand what the room is like. But if we take only small pictures, small areas of the room, they are all different. So it's only by seeing the totality that we begin to understand what it is, not just looking at one small section.
Okay.
Huh?
When you are at experiencing how you see, does it mean you are in the fourth jhana at that moment? Must it be the fourth jhana before you start seeing how you see?
Well, that's a good question. Yes, it may be true. But it is really in the fourth jhana you begin to be able to see how you see properly.
So,
But once you have seen it, you know it.
and then Bhante, one more.
Yeah.
The next step doesn't mean once you're able to do that, you become awakened. have the panya.
You can become awakened
And the panya.
if you start with sammaditthi. That is why it is very important to start with sammaditthi. So when you start with sammaditthi, you can even understand it in the first jhana. But if you don't start with sammaditthi, even if you enter the fourth jhana, you might not understand it properly.
No panya.
Yeah. Panya won't come properly. So this is why the sammaditthi, which is understanding the intellectually, is very important. Although the real understanding comes only when the emotions completely disappear.
Okay, by your explanation today, can you just try to explain a little bit on two items? One is how does our reaction towards metta come about in this situation? When we see how we are supposed to not react to emotions, then metta by itself is also a strong sense of showing universal benevolence. How do you actually associate these two to actually have the right view? Thank you.
Good. It's a good question. The important thing is that I told you metta is not an emotion. Metta becomes possible in the absence of emotion. It is the emotion that prevents metta, which is becoming interested in the welfare of all beings, not just the people that you like or you attach to. So that means the lust, hate and delusion has to disappear for metta to appear. So when this lust, hate and delusion is disappearing, gradually you will be developing metta automatically. So that's the important thing. And if your mind is properly purified, which means free from lust, hate and delusion, then there is metta. You don't have to cultivate metta as a separate thing. As your self-centered emotions gradually disappear, what is left is metta. Metta, karuna, mudita and upekka. What is your question?
No, same.
Same. Two minds that work in a similar way, huh? Okay.
One more.
Yeah.
One day. Does Yoniso Manasikara come in this, what I call, in this set of seven?
Good that you asked that question. Because most people think Yoniso Manasikara is seeing things as they are, which is not correct. Yoniso Manasikara means seeing things, seeing how things come to be. That is the meaning of Yoniso Manasikara. Seeing how things come to be. Not seeing things as they are.
Bhante, does it mean it goes back to your two words? The first one is what you see. The second one
And
is
how we
you
see.
see.
That's right. That is the how we see. Huh?
How you see superficially or otherwise?
How we see is the process of seeing. The process by which you see. Becoming aware of that. Another one, huh?
Clarifying something. Is Sampajanya mentioned in your Avinya and Paninya? Is Sampajanya these two items? Clear comprehension.
Sampajanya simply means coming from pajanati. Pajanati is a verb of panya. Sampajanati. That is, it is coming from, Sampajanya comes from Sampajanati. And that means that is seeing in terms of how things come to be. Not seeing things as they are.
So Bhante, with going through these 7 stages, going through this Satta Bojjhanga, what do you call? would there be different stages of insight knowledges that become evident to the meditator?
Stages of
Insight knowledges, jnana. How are there different kinds of insight knowledges that become apparent to the meditator?
I told you some time back that in the Visuddhimagga they speak of Navamaha Vidassana Jnana, 9 jnanas, insights. That kind of thing is not there in this. That is only in the Visuddhimagga. But these people who talk about insight meditation talk about that, I know. But here there are 9 levels of development which is found in the Satipatthana Sutra. And that is not what the Vipassana teachers talk about or what the Visuddhimagga talks about. It's different. It is simply what you get in the Satipatthana Sutra as iti ajjattam va kaya kayanupassi vihirati, bahidda va kaya kayanupassi vihirati, and so on, which means seeing Ajjatta means seeing subjectively and seeing objectively, looking at the body subjectively or looking at the body objectively, then looking at the body both subjectively and objectively, then looking at the body in terms of how it comes into being, then looking at the body in terms of how it comes to disappear, and then looking in both ways how it comes to be and how it disappears, and then thinking just the body exists, but only as a matter of perception and awareness, and nacha kinchi loke upadiyati, anissito cha viharti, that you don't depend on any of those ways of thinking and you do not personalize anything in the world. Those are the steps, those are 9 steps there. But there is no other insights as it is mentioned in the Visuddhimagga. That's why I say that later Buddhists started trying to interpret the older teachings in their own way, and gradually the earlier concepts disappeared. That's how things happen.
One thing, some Buddhist literature mention that during the stages of enlightenment, means from Bojjhanga to say Sotapanna, one goes through the Magga Phala stages. Is that actually mentioned in any of the suttas?
Magga Phala, these are not really things like the way they describe it. Magga simply means the path. Phala means the result. If you follow a certain path, then you will reap certain results. That is all. Magga and the Phala.
Also to do with the salutation to the Sangha.
Huh?
A salutation to the Sangha has mentioned 8 pairs, 8 persons, 4 pairs. So what does that?
8 persons.
8 persons or 4
Yeah.
pairs.
Yeah.
What does that actually refer to?
No, that is referring to, there are these 4 states of development levels. Sotapanna, Sakdagami, Anagami and Arahant. That means Sotapanna is one who entered the stream, that is the Noble Eightfold Path, is the stream. You enter the stream and Saptagami means if you begin to practice the 5 precepts, not the 5 precepts, the 4 exercises that I speak of. So Sotapanna is a person who has really entered 5 steps in the Noble Eightfold Path. You see, Samma Ditti, Samma Sankappa, Samma Vacha, Samma Kammanta, Samma Ajiva. Up to that point, 5 steps gone. Sotapanna. Now, then they begin to practice the 4 exercises that I called prevention, elimination, cultivation and maintenance. Those are the 4 exercises. You begin to practice those exercises, you can come to a level where the emotional impulses become weakened, and weakened to a minimal stage. When you weaken to that point, you are supposed to be a once returner. And when you have weakened those emotional impulses to completion, that means they are absent altogether. Then you become an anagami, non-returner. But there are 5 more things to be got rid of. These are only 5 things that you have eliminated. There are 10 altogether, and 5 more things remaining. And when you get rid of the other 5 completely, you become an arahant. So the one who is practicing and trying to become a sotapanna, once stream entered, he is in the magga. One who has attained the sotapanna has got the results of the practice. So then you begin to become a person who is practicing to become a once returner. And once you have achieved that level, then you become a once returner. Then you begin to practice trying to become a non-returner. Then you keep doing that, and once you have come to that point, you become a non-returner. And then the next step is to become an arahant, and you have to get rid of 5 things altogether. And when you try to do that, you are still in the magga for that, and then Once you become an arahant, you have reached the phala. 4 levels. That's what it means. But some people, some of these commentators have been saying Magga Chitta and Phala Chitta are just at the same time. So that kind of explanation I think is not correct. These are all commentaries. They are called the commentaries.
One last question.
Yeah?
One last question.
Now we'll come to an end. Now is the